Hello, I'm Tiamat. I go by T, she, her, and welcome back to another episode of the Open Hearth Podcast, Around the Hearth. This show draws on the experience and play of the Open Hearth gaming community. We're an online TTRPG community that organizes online play of lots of primarily tabletop role-playing games, including story games, OSR, solo games, and more. We do require the use of layered safety tools in all of our online games, which you can learn about more in our Code of Conduct, which you can find at https://openhearthgaming.com/code-of-conduct. As usual, we've brought on a pair of community members here to discuss their recent gaming and drill down on one RPG they've played, read, or watched. And today we have Amanda and Cale. Let's start with Amanda. Introduce yourself briefly. Let us know who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. My pronouns are she, her. I am a longtime supporter of the community, and I'm very excited to be on the podcast today. I am a Canadian tabletop role-playing game enthusiast. I have a little micro press called Fire Pit Press, which has a zine called Sprigs and Kindling, which is primarily about Carve from Brindlewood and trophy games. That comes out whenever we manage to get it out. Originally, it was every 3 months, but the last one is extremely late, so thanks for everyone's patience on that. I also am working on an anthology of trophy incursions called Ruin, and that should be out later this year.
Very exciting. Our second guest today.
Hi, I'm Cale. My pronouns are he, him. I've been playing on the Hearth for, I guess it's been a couple of years now. I unfortunately only play infrequently enough that it's hard to really keep track of how much I've played. It feels like not that much, but I think it's been kind of a while at this point. I play a lot of PBTA and Forge in the Dark type games, and I've been getting a little bit into GM-ful games recently.
Speaking of games, what have y'all been playing? Let's start with just a quick overview, what's on your plate at the moment, and then we'll get a second round and go into more detail on the game that you want to drill down into. Amanda, what have you been playing?
I recently finished an in-person game of Pirate Borg. I've never played any MÖRK board game. One of my friends was running the game, and I played some kind of sea turtle man. It was great. I was trying my best to die. I did not end up dying the way I wanted. I died in a different way, but then I came back, so that was cool. It's MÖRK board. It's fine. I'm currently in a recorded version of Starhold that's getting started pretty soon. I am playing a very big, beefy lady who is full of heart and not full of brain. I'm excited for that. Recently, I played a game called A Fool's Errand. It's a tarot-based game where the tarot cards both build the world and act as your deck. It's A Fool's Errand by J. Strautman and B. Marsolier. I played that at a convention fairly recently. And I've been playing a lot of trophy playtests for the book, the anthology that's coming out. I've been helping people test their incursions, and it's been a lot of fun. I've died a lot. It's trophy.
Cale, what have you been playing?
It was a couple of months ago. I played a game actually with UT, Once More Into the Void. It's a Firebrands hack. You are the former crew under a captain. You saved the world once and then fell into disrepair and disrepute, but you have to come back together and save the world yet again or die trying. That was a ton of fun. And then more recently, I played in a short playtest of a game called Embers of the Void, which is being developed by one of the community members, Mike Minatulo. I'm going to talk more about that later. And then I managed to squeak in a session of Band-Aids and Bullet Holes earlier this week, which was just on Kickstarter. Sam Dunawald's game. It's pick up and play. We played the flavor of it that is the original conceit of a World of Assassins type John Wick style game. And that was a lot of fun.
And I've been running quite a bit of stuff on the Hearth. I ran A Land Once Magic for Shane, who's a new member. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in more depth. I'm also running 30 Sword Lesbians, 4-shot, I think, for Dev, another new member. And just as an aside, people asked, and I was like, yeah, I can absolutely run stuff, and jumped in there. So we do have a games request channel. You can't hurt to ask. Somebody might say yes. They often do. Also just wrapped up The King is Dead, another Firebrands, running that. Very fun. And currently in the middle of Uneasy Lies the Head, which is a little bit more of a strategic-y, tactic-y, I'd still call it Firebrands-y kind of game. And then playing on the Hearth, I was in Dunna's The Last Caravan game. So if you listen to that podcast episode, I was one of the players in that. Almost finished with The Emperor's Undead, another Firebrand Locked Tomb themed with Dunna. Had a Fomoria 2-shot with Dom, which Amanda, actually my first Borg-like. So we both had our first experiences recently. Very, very fun.
Did you survive?
We did, yeah. We actually got out. Well, there are multiple endings in this particular quick start. I shall provide no spoilers. Suffice to say, I had a great time. I'm also in Shane's Fearful Symmetries campaign, which is also recorded and put up. So if y'all want to pop in and watch that, feel free. And then off the Hearth, I played Cairn for the first time, which I really enjoyed. Well, OSR Dungeon Crawler. I'm in an Armorister Advent campaign that we're interleaving with an original Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands campaign in different universes. Very mech focused in that group right now. Got my usual D&D campaign. And then I'm in a game of The Between and a game of Stonetop, both of which I'm enjoying. Stonetop in particular, I am loving as a system. But let's get more in depth. So Amanda, tell me about Planet Raygun.
Yeah, I've been in the first playtest campaign of it. I've been playing modules, heists for Planet Raygun before, but now I'm playing an actual campaign. Planet Raygun is a retro sci-fi heist game where you're playing a crew of rogues traveling from planet to planet, pulling ridiculous heist jobs. It is by Annie Award winner Mike Martins, who is well known amongst the community. The setting feels less like Star Wars and more like if 1960s spy movies, space opera, and pulp science fiction got thrown into like a blender. Every planet has its own culture, it's got its weird power structures, there's some kind of valuable thing you're trying to steal. For me, what makes it interesting is the game is built around planning heists and discovering who your characters really are. For example, my character, Jane Doe 2.0, is a machina, which is basically a robot. At some point, she became a vampire due to a heist gone wrong, and things went badly. Every time things go badly, you end up revealing pieces of your character's history that explain how they got so weird in the first place. This is a Carve from Brindlewood game, which makes sense if you know Carve from Brindlewood and you know how, when things go wrong, you get to reveal your backstory. But what I think Planet Raygun does differently from a lot of Carve from Brindlewood games is that it's not really about solving mysteries. In typical Carve from Brindlewood, you're gathering clues, and you eventually form a theory about what happened. In Planet Raygun, you're gathering opportunities and assets and then forming your heist plan. So instead of asking, like, who committed the murder, you're asking, how are we going to rob this impossible target? Kind of scratches this very similar creative itch, but it points towards heists instead of investigations. One of my favorite mechanics is watch. Planet Raygun has a built-in pressure system. When the watch gets to a certain point, you have to move on your plan, even if it's not ready. The longer you spend poking around, gathering intel, making contacts, and getting ready for a job, the more watch advances, because it advances every time you get a 1 on a roll. So you can still keep digging for more advantages, but every time you do, you're gambling with the clock. And like with many Carve from Brindlewood, another thing that I really love is the game actively discourages writing 10 pages of backstory before session 1. You start with very little established, and when things go wrong, you reveal pieces of your character's history. Those reveals improve your outcomes mechanically and provide your backstory. So instead of showing up with a complete novel already written, you're discovering who your character is as you play, and backstory is more of a resource. You can actually use it mechanically. Carve from Brindlewood, based on Brindlewood Bay by Jason Cordova. In Brindlewood Bay, a lot of emotional energy comes from the relationships between the Mavens. In Planet Raygun, it takes that same idea and it turns it into something that's mechanically important during the heist. You get Bondi. So instead of everybody being like cool loners standing in different corners of the room doing heist things, the game actively rewards investing in your relationships between your crew members. So you can use your Bondi to replace a die in somebody else's role, as long as you justify how your character has helped them. And it makes for really, really interesting scenes, especially if you're not in the same scene and you have to justify using a Bondi somehow. It's really, really fun. The mechanics are clever. The setting is imaginative. There's a lot you can dig into if you like game design, because it's by Mike Martins, who is a brilliant game designer. But the real joy is getting to be part of the crew of absolute weirdos. You're traveling across the galaxy with like a disgraced royal or a rogue scientist or a sentient machine or an eccentric collector or whatever bizarre combination your group creates. Every job starts with everyone throwing out increasingly ridiculous ideas. somehow convincing themselves those ideas are brilliant, and then scrambling when the consequences arrive. One session, you're doing infiltration on a high security facility. The next, you're making deals with the local crime bosses, or you're robbing a bunch of vampires. And somewhere along the way, your robot becomes a vampire, and nobody thinks that's the strangest thing that's happened this week. For me, that's kind of the magic of the game. It's stylish, it's funny, it's optimistic, it's full of surprises. It captures the feeling of being part of a found family of lovable criminals trying to change the galaxy one terrible decision at a time. And I really, really am excited for people to get their hands on this game once it comes out. It's still in playtest. I'm hoping it'll be ready soon.
How are the Bondi generated? I'm just interested in hearing more about this resource. And also, if you roll a 1 on the Bondi, does that increase the watch? Could your help make things happen faster?
You roll the Bondi at the beginning of a new heist. You get a question such as, how is your character related to this heist in some way? It's more in-depth than that. And you roll the die, and you get to choose who you want to assign the die to. So let's say you roll a 4, 5, and a 6 for 3 different die, and you have 3 different co-heisters. You get to assign which die to which person, and you get to explain why you do that. So you might say, oh, I'm assigning the 6 to my colleague Leland, because he always has my back, and I'll have his. But I might assign the 4 to somebody else who maybe has not had my back so much in the past, so I don't trust them as much. You get to play around with your characters' relationships, even outside of roleplay, mechanically, and it's really a lot of fun. You get to do it at the beginning of the heist, and then whatever your Bondi are, they're set for the rest of the heist. If you look up Planet Raygun and Clear Keep, Mike Martin's, you should be able to find at least something online. He puts all of his documents up there for people to look at. Or if you're on the Gauntlet Discord, you can find all of Mike's documents on there and follow along. You could even play your own games of it.
I do like not just the mechanical support for relationships between player characters, but also randomization of it. Because, if you roll all 2s, wow, I guess you are the loner bad boy.
Then you have to explain why you're giving everyone a 2.
Cale, what are you going to tell us about?
I want to talk a bit more about Embers of the Void. It's a game that community member Mike Minatulo is developing. This was his first playtest of it, so it's quite likely that whatever I talk about here is going to change by the end. But I think it's got a lot of really cool stuff going on, a really interesting play space or play conceit. I think he said this came out of a thread of inadvisable ideas on the Discord at one point. He was trying to figure out something for doing multiple table playing together without scheduling nonsense. It is designed as a many table game with potentially many facilitators. All of those tables are individually their own regions of space. We played it in a space-flavored game. I don't know if that's his plan, but I think you could do it as a bunch of ant colonies or a bunch of whatever. You're basically taking a bunch of different regions, and all of those regions are under some oppressive empire. Each of the tables is taking actions against their local representatives of the empire, and those actions ripple out to the broader galaxy, say, mechanically influence what the other tables are doing, and you're also sending messages between the tables, but in a way that doesn't require you to have all to sync up on your stories exactly. You don't have to maintain continuity because there's not really characters moving across these tables. They can play different time frames and things like that, but you're getting these messages across. Mike didn't describe them this way, but each of the tables is writing, powered by the apocalypse, like love letters to the other tables, a little something to get you going at the start of the session. The game is Aegon based. You're doing challenges, and the opposition has a dice pool that's constructed out of a bunch of stuff. They roll it, and that sets your target number, and then the players each have their own dice pools that they construct. In this, the Empire constructs their dice pool based on some dice that are shared across the galaxy, and also dice that are the local strength of these various pillars of oppression. As your table fights against oppression in your local space, you move those numbers up and down, and you can make it easier for yourself later by fighting back against one of the other pillars. But also, if you do really well, you can actually push the dice at the global empire level down, and then make it easier for the other tables to then combat this global empire. And so you're helping each other, but at like one step remove, where changes at my table ripple across to your table, but at a distance. And I just thought that was a really neat way to mechanize the connection between the tables without requiring a bunch of upkeep. It's a fairly small set of numbers that you're keeping track of that define this global empire. Each of the pillars of oppression that the empire has, it has a nomenclature. There's the chain, the empire oppresses through fear and obedience, or the coin, where it's more about greed and debt and ownership. The way he's got it set up with the broadcasts, these ways your region is communicating out to the other tables, is you're not supposed to mention anything specific. You're sending these coded messages out into the world. You don't want the empire to catch them, so you can't name names. You have to refer to the empire through these abstract killer names, which means that your message about, like, we can fight the empire by turning their greed against them in the coin, you say it based on your session, but the other table can interpret it in the context of whatever world building they've done about what the coin looks like in their region. Each of you can be thinking and framing the empire in the way that makes sense to your table while still communicating about that across tables in a way that actually feels meaningful. In the playtest, we were one table playing once. We didn't get to really play with it a lot, but I think as a way of connecting these distinct tables, I think that's got a lot going for it.
You know what would be really cool is having a bunch of tables play this at a con at the same time.
Yeah, I could see that being really neat. What were some of the other things? Oh, when we were starting the game, we were trying to design our region. We had some cool paint the scene style questions. Ask everyone around the table something like, what's interesting about the region? It's climate, it's ecology, whatever. So we threw out a bunch of answers and built on each other and take those answers and then use that as a lens at which to describe how is the empire doing the bad things they're doing. In our example, it was like, from a religious perspective, we didn't want to be on land after sunset. So the question is, like, how is the empire betraying that? Well, they've set up all of their spaceports and everything else on land. It's a GM-less Aegon conceit. Everyone is contributing to this, and then there's just this immediate turnaround. Okay, what does that look like now from the antagonist's perspective? Which I thought was a great way to get the world built up that you're then going to play in. I played Deathmatch Island once, which is another Aegon-derived game. For myself personally, the mechanical thing where you kind of all roll your outcomes first, and then once you know what everyone's outcome is, then you go around and describe what does that look like. Put your resources into the pot, see what happens, and then you get all the description afterwards. I just really like that as an alternative framing or way of doing conflict resolution in games in general. It played well in this system. Each play session is a series of recover from the previous fight against the oppressor in some aspect, and then build up your strength a little bit, discover some opportunities, do the Aegon-style challenge roll, and then how does the Empire snowball back at you? It's a system I would love to play it out in a different context.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. Sometimes it can be very easy to fall into a kind of, well, my opponent is generically evil, right? People don't like bugs, so I'm going to lean on that and be like, they're bug people, and we're just never going to see eye to eye for whatever reason. Or I guess eye to eyes, depending on a specific type of bug person. This is very specific and tailored. And also, you have a good reason for wanting this to stop.
Yeah.
I really like that as a way to build an opponent.
It flowed really well when we were at the table. We did the world building, and it was very clear, oh yeah, this is exactly how they're terrible. I am very excited to see what he makes of it, see how it evolves.
And I promised, and now I'm going to deliver, talking about A Land Once Magic, which I actually ended up facilitating twice last week. I wanted to talk about it because both times we came in at just around 2 hours for a complete game, and it felt satisfying. And that is just a nice thing to have in your arsenal as somebody who runs or plays games. In the designer's own words, A Land Once Magic is a conversational post-fantasy world-building TTRPG by award-winning game designer Vidya Valetti, published by More Blueberries. With a deck of cards and a group of friends, you will have everything you need to build a world unlike any you have seen before. I will say there are a couple of things here that made me do the puppy head tilt. I'm not entirely sure what is intended by post-fantasy world. Description is, shakes off the dull colors of traditional fantasy and invites a full spectrum of your imagination. And I think this is perhaps being specifically placed in opposition to epic commercial fantasy of the 80s and 90s, but I don't know. I've also seen people talk about post-dungeon fantasy, which I've seen more commonly used to refer to specifically systems that are modern in setting. I'm interested if this is a term of art that more people have used that I'm just not super familiar with.
I've never heard that term before.
I wanted to pull out my highlighter and be like, what is this in conversation with? Also, I pretty much personally only really buy games digitally. I'm one of those people, but I have seen pictures and heard that the physical copy of the game is nice pocket-sized and very pleasant to hold. Very, very structured play. It's conversational in the sense that you are asked questions and then you answer them. Something to keep an eye on, there are actually 2 types of tables when you do this. So one is that each section of the 3 sections is a single question, and the card you draw will determine the general answer, and then you as the player will provide the specifics. And that's just 3 questions. And the other type is where you are intended for each player to answer 2 things, and the card you draw will tell you, based on odds, evens, or faces, and suit the specific question you are answering. And if you draw the same thing twice, then you will have previously picked an additional supplemental table and you'll go and answer the question from the supplemental table. So you never answer the same question twice. This did trip up one of my tables. Ideal number of players, probably 3, because the first time of table, there's 3 questions. That is a nice, easy 1-to-1 match there. I played it with a shared Google Doc and playing cards out. Worked very smoothly. You could absolutely do it with an actual deck of cards. Something else that was done during game setup was palettes and touchstones that were interesting. Palettes, we each individually came up with a couple of possible descriptive words. I think some of the ones that we came up with were bejeweled or waterlogged. And then once everyone had their set of 2, we picked 3 from those. And then touchstones were specific aspects of something that is not traditionally considered fantasy. I think an example from the book was Cowboy Bebop's soundtrack. One thing from the game is creeping societal rot of Faulkner's fiction. And you use those to guide the type of world that you want to build. And if you ever draw a joker, you immediately add a new palette or touchstone or both. And then shuffle the joker in and take your turn again. It is very top-down. You start with, why does magic exist? Why it is breaking? You build your society, you build your city, you decide what the city looks like, and then finally you build a bunch of travelers going on a journey, and then that's the final game. You start with this whole world, and you end with a small group of people. Very tight, very structured. If you are interested in some suggested game pairings, it is a pretty short game, it's about 2 hours, but it might be a nice thing to think about. The Quiet Year or the Deep Forest. I personally tend to prefer the Deep Forest these days, which is fewer creatures who are dealing with things that have happened rather than settlers trying to find a place to live, which is the focus of the Quiet Year. If you wanted to build more of the world out, Exquisite Biome might be a good choice. This is specifically a very similar game using a deck of cards, which you would already have if you're playing in person, and you're building out a little nature documentary biome, some animals, some creatures, their interactions with each other. Specifically Microscope Chronicle, if you wanted to find something in the world that you wanted to really drill down into and get more information about. And then once you have this collection of people, if you wanted to have some sort of light games to take them someplace, Pull Over, I Need to Pee, which is a lighthearted randomized game about taking a road trip, might be a good shout depending on the tone that you ended up with. And I think any For the Queen or any Descended from the Queen game that matches your tone and genre and vibe, because many of those are about taking a journey and seeing what happens. Nice tight little game, would be great for convention play, would be great to just hang out with your friends, good to stick in your pocket, really easy to run online.
I'm really interested in the fact that you use palettes for this. I only just learned about the palettes thing recently, and it seems a really cool way to do safety tools and world building. How did the palettes, aside from the Faulkner thing, how did those affect your game?
I think mostly it was structuring theme and tone. The second game, British Weird Fantasy, was one of the touchstones. I will say it's not as comprehensive a palette creation process as I've done with other games. Sometimes you'll have a palette which is like, these are the things that we want, these are the things that we don't want. So you'll combine a little bit of your tone setting, your topic setting with safety tools and lines and veils as kind of like a squish. This is much more lightweight than, for example, what's in Uneasy Lies the Head has a much more robust palette system.
The sense I'm getting of the post-fantasy is like weird things that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily associate. It seems like the gameplay was structured as designed to create those weird contrasts. Did it actually work out?
I think so. I mean, I also played with groups of people that are very well-versed in a wide variety of speculative fiction. The first game we ended with a little bit more sci-fi, where it's a world that's not quite tidally locked. So a lot of society is trying to stay in the dusk line to avoid the temperature extremes. And then, of course, the big city is right on the pole, and that's where everyone wants to live, and they would prefer that you not. We ended up with some pretty strong things of class-based violence. I would be interested to see how it worked with people who had not immersed themselves in speculative fiction, and I think this might be the intended thrust, folks who are really only familiar with sword and sorcery, very mainstream, epic high fantasy.
Yeah. I continue to be on the lookout for the right game to try and play with coworkers in a lunch hour plus. It's a tricky thing to find. So I was curious about this one. And to your point, how would it play with folks that have not played the broad scope of RPG or fantasy trappings?
There is quite a bit of scaffolding. So even if you draw a card, you choose the question, there are provided some potential answers to prime the pump.
Nice.
And you could just pick one of them. I think it would work really well in that situation, honestly.
Cool.
It sounds like it would be a really good game for people who are new to games or you want to play something in a very short period of time. It sounds really appropriate for that.
Yeah, I would agree. Which brings us to segment 2. So, Amanda, I must know, what is giving you life?
I've got 3 things to talk about. First, my partner and I have been playing a board game called Sky Team. It's a 2-player cooperative game where one person is the pilot and one person is the co-pilot, and you're trying to land an airplane together. You can't talk while you're trying to land the airplane. It's very, very stressful, but in the best way. It's one of those games where you're constantly trying to communicate with very limited information, and when you pull off the landing, you feel like absolute geniuses. I kind of cheated, and I do talk while we're playing the game, even though you're not supposed to, but I talk in character where I'm the co-pilot, and I'm like, this is co-pilot Amanda, and we are going in for a landing. And I like to do it that way because I find it very awkward to not talk. But otherwise, it's super, super fun, and you could probably pick it up at any game store. Second is my shameless plug. I've been working on Ruin, the anthology of one-shot incursions for Trophy. This is an anthology of dark fantasy horror adventures for Trophy, and it's been consuming all of my creative energy. I am in layout and editing right now. We've got some incredible writers. We have Kieran Gillen, we have Wes Franks, we have, Lynn Kadega, we've got Premi Muhammad. We've got so many writers that are working on this, and the book is starting to look really gorgeous, and it's exciting to see it all come together. And third, my partner and I have been watching Widow's Bay. It's a TV show on, I think, Apple TV. It's got this weird small town supernatural mystery vibe that I really, really love. It's sort of like if Parks and Rec meets Midnight Mass. It's weird. It's the kind of show where every episode answers one question and raises 3 more, and everyone in town is hiding something. And also it has Stephen Root. I love Stephen Root. I'll watch him do anything. It's very much my comfort zone for mindless TV, where it's a little bit horror, a little bit funny. Great, great watch. Highly recommend.
Fantastic. Thank you. Cale, what's giving you life?
I am a chronically under-timed parent of 3. So I do not have time to sit down at a table with people because getting people to the house is hard and getting time to sit. Anyway, I enjoy playing along with role-playing games like tabletop wargaming type things, move your big blocks of armies around, and I cannot do that in person. Does not work. So I have been working on a virtual tabletop for asynchronous wargame play. And I have finally gotten it to a point where I felt it was enough of functional to share out to people that were not my immediate friends and family. I shared it on a couple of Discords. I got one person who was very excited about this idea, and they have been getting a game encoded on the platform in a way that they're excited to play. And so I'm excited to try playing it with them. They've also found a bunch of bugs that I hadn't found when I was messing around with it myself, which is great. So I'm excited to see that moving forward. If you want to talk about it more, come find me on the Discord. I'm happy to chat.
That's so cool.
You're making this yourself?
Correct. I am a software developer by trade. My creative outlet is building more software.
That's so cool.
I think there are a lot of people who will be very interested in that. I recently have been very delighted by balcony solar and the progress we're making in the US. Folks from Europe may be like, you don't have balcony solar. We do not. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is basically a solar panel that has a micro inverter on it, and you plug it into your wall and it offsets your electricity use. So it doesn't make like a ton of electricity. We're talking enough to run a refrigerator. Also, it does not run when the grid is off. They have anti-islanding built into them. There's, I think, some misconceptions about that. They're pretty cheap. I think in the US, units run around $400, which, considering how energy bills look, is perhaps a worthwhile investment for you. That said, it is illegal in a lot of places in the US. It's been sort of caught in regulatory limbo for a very long time. But in the US, we've made really good progress this year on getting legislation through to make this legal and not have to have people do the same amount of paperwork as you would for a full rooftop solar install. Obviously, if you live in an apartment and you just want to plug something in and you rent, not feasible for you. I think it's currently 6 states have passed legislation. I believe Utah was the first. And I'm in Virginia, and we just got ours through this year. Fantastic. It was a lot of work. Listen, if we're going to live in a punk future, I, for one, would prefer solar punk. And it's really wonderful to see the on-ramp for this technology coming to the US. In Europe, you already have it. And other folks, see what your local situation is. It's cool technology, and I'm happy it's going to be available for more people.
That sounds so cool. I'm looking it up right now, and it's not technically legal in Canada. There are no jurisdictions that approve it, but I don't think it's technically illegal either. Something to look into. I live in an apartment.
Germany has done the most studies on this, but they've had it for about 10 years. There are over 1 million units in use, and they've had a fantastic safety record, and a lot of renters and people in apartments have been able to benefit from solar and getting free electricity from the sun. Listeners, that is our show. Guests, thank you both for making time to come hang out, chat.
Thanks for having us.
If folks want to keep up with you, perhaps to learn more about your VTT, Cale, or Amanda, Ruin, Sprigs and Kindling, where can they do that?
The easiest place to find me and everything that I'm up to is IamATrex.com. That is my website, and you can follow anything I'm doing from there.
I'm Vengeful Pickle in all the places, although I just Googled it. There's some Vengeful Pickles that are not me, which is really weirding me out because this is a nickname that has been unique across all things, but apparently there's a handful. Anyway, vengefulpickle.com is my website. It is shamefully out of date, and most of my interesting stuff is in subdomains, not linked from the root. So if you want to check out the tabletop, it's warboard.vengefulpickle.com, or just come find me on the Discord.
The Open Hearth Podcast is a production of the Open Hearth gaming community. We have an online gaming calendar where folks can sign up for sessions, and we'd love to have you join us. If nothing works for you, again, just ask in the Discord. And if you've enjoyed the show, please consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/openhearthgaming. We have a Discord. We're also on Blue Sky, Tumblr, and Mastodon, Diced Out Camp. You can find out more about all of that at openhearthgaming.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider rating, subscribing, and reviewing our show. It helps other people find us. I hope you have some cool things that you're more excited about now than you were before. And we'll see you in the next episode.